I was at a film festival where I took this film, and I had a woman come to me after the film festival, and she goes, "Thank you so much for making this film." And I naturally assumed she was a fertility patient. And she goes, "Your film made me realize how bad of a friend I was." And I was like, I was not expecting that answer. And she goes, "I didn't realize that when they were going through it, how bad this really is." And she goes, I kept telling her to like snap out of it. It's been months. Like, come on, let's get back to normal. And she goes, "There's no getting back to normal until you get to a resolution."
A new film, Conception, delves deep into the infertility journey of a young married couple, Amy and Vic. We watch them transition from a young, city-loving, career-driven couple in love to suburban dwellers with a house, some failed IVF cycles, and no baby yet. So many parts of this film will resonate with anyone going through infertility. Here to discuss this incredible film is writer, producer, and director of Conception, Tarun Verma. Welcome to Baby or Bust.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Lora.
Tarun, there are lots of examples of infertility or family building struggles that can be kind of a sideline in films, sort of a part of a character's story, but it's pretty rare to have the real centerpiece of a film be all about a fertility journey. How were you inspired to create this film?
For several years, I was actually a fertility pharmacist. I call it that. That's not a real title, but I was heavily involved in the fertility space. I was working with patients left and right, trying to help them get pregnant. And I found myself in a place where I had to learn to sort of be the expert of what we can in this field. And so I would sit down with physicians, I would sit down with advocates and coordinators, and I would learn everything about it, because part of being a great pharmacist is listening to your patients. I had patients that would come in and start asking me questions that they would feel uncomfortable asking their physician, which is normal, right? Mm-hmm. And so I was like, I need to have answers for these people, because they're struggling. They're struggling to have a baby. They're putting money on the line. As patients, they're actually some of my favorite patients because they're so plugged into their own healthcare. I knew that I had to become a subject matter expert in it. And so I spent years working with that population. And to be honest, it touched my heart beyond measure. I never knew that this was as big of a struggle as it is. I mean, it opened my eyes up to the whole world of infertility, because I was completely in the dark about it.
Do Amy and Vic, do the characters stem from patients that you worked with?
The HIPAA compliant answer to that is no. But both of these individuals are inspired by all the individuals that I've been with. What I did was I sort of picked, and being a filmmaker, it's all about sort of playing up the drama. And so I would sort of pick and choose from all of my patients and go, this makes for a captivating character of Amy. I tried to sort of aggregately pool them together. And Vic, I tried to take all the men that I saw coming into the pharmacy, pooled them into one Vic. And Amy was a collaboration of all the different women that I had sort of collaborated with and worked with to get them to where they wanted to go in their process. You can't over embellish. You can't be dishonest about it. I wanted to be very, very brutally honest about the way that the journey of IVF goes. And I didn't want to sugarcoat it, which Hollywood is very, very inclined to sugarcoat stuff. And I just didn't see how you could sugarcoat something like this.
I mean, I see a lot of my own patients and even a lot of myself going through my own fertility journey in Amy. And then I see a lot of my patients also in Vic. I feel like for Amy, she is very driven, goal-oriented. Mm-hmm. When she decides to tackle infertility and tackle having a baby, she kind of reminds me of like a project manager. She's like, okay, I'm going to research, I'm going to like have a plan, I'm going to go through this. And that really resonates with a lot of like goal-oriented, kind of career-driven people like myself. And I just appreciated seeing that shown. That is a caricature, but you also see such a soft side of her. So it really was kind of a nice balance. And seeing a little bit of her vulnerability, like that kind of like goal-oriented is sort of hiding somebody that's really scared that she might not be a mom. And you capture that really well.
Thank you so much. Like I said, it was about being as accurate as I can to this, because I never really found a man who was sort of like, I'm going to take charge of this IVF journey, right? Like that doesn't really happen. It's usually the women, and they would come in and they would go, Tarun, some of them would have journals and, they'd like, I have a plan. Can you tell me about fertility massages? Can you tell me about fertility vitamins? Like, is any of this stuff helpful? Is it not helpful? And then even when I was done talking to them, I get a call 2 days later. Hey, Tarun, I want to follow up on something real quick. And I had to make sure that Amy embodied all of those facets of that personality, because I absolutely love that about all the women that I've helped, because most of them all did take charge. Mm-hmm. And Vic too, I wanted to make sure he was sensitive, because most of the guys that came into the pharmacy, I always took it as they were kind of in over their heads, because again, this is a very much a woman's issue and a woman's body. And so they were kind of like, I don't really, fully understand what's going on. So they would know that like, I just need to be as supportive as possible.
And seeing his sort of desire to support Amy, to sort of take a back seat, but also kind of express that he wishes that he could do more, like the interaction he has with the therapist. And thank you so much for putting a therapist in this movie, because paying attention to mental health and emotional wellness through this journey is so important. And some of the really interesting conversations between them as a couple and the therapist and individually, and just seeing Vic kind of feel vulnerable and a little helpless and just not knowing how to really help Amy while she's really struggling, because he's struggling too.
I mean, despite this being, like I just mentioned, this is very much a woman's journey. Men are also along for that ride as well. So it's, I'm not going to say it's just as hard for them. It's not, but it's hard for them as well, because it taxes the relationship. It taxes the marriage. And that's where the men really feel it.
There's a pharmacist that Vic has a very nice relationship with, like asks questions. Is the pharmacist based on you at all?
Yes, it was. So I was, my wife tried to make me play that character and I refused to. I was like, no, I'm not going to play a pharmacist. I play a pharmacist every day of my life. I don't need to play a pharmacist. I am the pharmacist. And so I wanted to give it, an up and coming actor a shot at it. So, part of being in the filmmaking world is sort of pushing inclusion, diversity, and all that. And so I was like, I want to put greener newbie actors out in front and give them more experience and be able to do. And so Maya came in, she's a pharmacist. Of course, I had to sit there and break it down like, hey, here's how I interact with my patients. Here's my bedside manner. Because again, they're actors. So they're like, what is a pharmacist supposed to be? Because I go to CVS, pick up my meds, and I don't even talk to my pharmacist. So I'm like, no. Here's how a really good one would interact. With that, I wanted to kind of show all healthcare professionals in a different light. We are more than just people who can write in notebooks and submit charts on EMR and things like that. And so the pharmacist doubled out as a friend. Instead of me making a friend character because during this journey, it's not a vacuum, even though that's kind of what I did. You have families involved, you have friends involved that people lean on, because this is a journey that requires a lot of emotional support. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to be able to take the healthcare professionals and double them as people that would be in their lives. So the therapist really doubles up as sort of a motherly figure for these two.
I appreciate your diverse cast. Like, I really noticed how many different ethnicities, different age groups, just different walks of life. Was that intentional on your part?
Intentional in two different ways. So one, Houston is, I think the last we checked was like the fourth biggest city in the world, or in the US. And so we're an incredibly diverse city. So that was one. Two, I wanted to kind of play on an allegory of how this is not specific to one group of people. Mm-hmm. Infertility affects everyone across the world, regardless of race. Now, I know when you get into the nitty gritty of it, there are certain groups that are a little bit more predisposed to higher infertility rates, but there's not a single group out there that doesn't suffer from this. So I wanted that to kind of also play into it, because I want other people to be watching this going, I'm an Arab person, I'm an African, I'm from South America. I see representation of people in there in this film.
Tarun, I really appreciate that, because for a long time, fertility has been seen as like a white woman's issue. Celebrities that have felt comfortable coming out and talking about things, Nicole Kidman, Sarah Jessica Parker, things like that. And patients who are of color have not felt comfortable coming to the fertility doctor because they don't see themselves in the waiting room. They're worried about bias. They're worried about, how they're going to be treated in the office. Mm-hmm. And it's been so powerful to see women of color like Michelle Obama, Gabrielle Union coming out and talking about these things. So your movie, where you have all these different people from different walks of life is so important, because infertility doesn't matter how much you make, your job, your color of your skin, everything about you. It really can impact everyone. And I really appreciate your thinking through that.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. The way you represent so many things that someone with infertility has gone through, like you could have just said like, oh, it's really difficult to talk to my friend who already has kids. I feel so left behind. But yet you show the, Vic and Amy out to dinner with this like couple friend who have a couple kids. Vic and Amy are trying. And you see just that interaction, right? Like, oh, the kids, I was up all night last night, have one of mine, maybe you don't want to do this. You guys are still so young and living in the city. Vic and Amy didn't say it, but I have certainly felt it in that situation. I felt like, gosh, I would kill to have those problems that my friends are complaining about.
So a lot of those little jokes with the friends kind of stemmed from one of these patients I had. She goes, I hate when people say you can have one of mine. That is a really hard sticking point. And I went as a writer, I was like, I'm putting that in the movie. That's fantastic. She goes, and when I talked to other patients, they said the same thing. They were like, it's like nails on a chalkboard anytime, because it's a common thing, right? The friends don't mean to say what they say. They just don't understand, right? They have the best of intentions. They're just trying to make you feel better, crack a joke, put a smile on your face. But only people that have gone through IVF and through any infertility struggle really, really 100% understand what another person went through. Couples who have kids don't. And so they often say these things like, oh, it's good. You guys should take the time to travel. And, these comments, they don't seem negative, but they've actually, in actuality, they're very negative, right? And they're condescending, and couples don't understand that. Quick story. I was at a film festival where I took this film, and I had a woman come to me after the film festival, and she goes, thank you so much for making this film. And I naturally assumed she was a fertility patient. And she goes, your film made me realize how bad of a friend I was. And I was like, I was not expecting that answer. And she goes, I didn't realize that when they were going through it, how bad this really is. And she goes, I kept telling her to like snap out of it. It's been months. Like, come on, let's get back to normal. And she goes, there's no getting back to normal until you get to a resolution. And I was like, absolutely correct. And she goes, I can't wait to go home and call her and just have a conversation with her. And that really hit home to me that this film's more than just a film for people who have been through infertility. This is for everyone else out there. Like, this is not something like, oh, if you've been through it, you should probably watch this movie. No, everyone can watch this movie because somebody will take something away. And then the other thing I kind of learned through this process, and my cast learned, everybody knows somebody that has gone through IVF or has infertility struggles. As a pharmacist, I kept telling all the actors, I was like, listen, this is a wide issue out there. And they're like, okay, Tarun. And then they come back 2 weeks later and go, I didn't realize somebody in my family went through this. Yeah. I didn't know that my cousin went through this. They never said anything. And I was like, that's kind of the point of this movie, is we want to normalize the discussion. Now, celebrities are doing their part, right? I think it was it recently Jennifer Aniston came out, right? And with her struggles of IVF, and she was unsuccessful. Then filmmakers and healthcare professionals like myself have an obligation to kind of push the conversation from our end as well. And so making this film is about normalizing that discussion too. I hope that this just allows a couple to just really talk about these things. If you're going to say, hey, is there a point to this movie, or what's one of the takeaways? One of my biggest takeaways of this movie is I hope couples talk about this stuff, whether they're a few weeks into dating, a couple of years into dating, or just newly married, because I know this is not a dating podcast, but one of the things on dating podcasts they talk about are your non-negotiables, right? As a couple. And so children and money are the two things that I know for a fact are non-negotiables. And so you need to discuss them. And the earlier you discuss these things, hey, do you want to have kids? How many kids do you want to have? And then you need to talk about every scenario that can happen. Hey, what if we can't have kids? Does that matter to you? Does that matter to me? How far are you willing to go if we can't have a child? How far am I willing to go if we can't have a child? And what if tomorrow you change your mind? What do we do? Like, I feel like, you can't be prepared for every scenario that happens, but I feel like as much open discussion as you can have, it just leads to less heartache later on.
I have had patients in my office who are in their mid-30s, early 40s, and have they've been married for over 10 years and honestly have very different expectations for their family. Now the options are limited because we've waited so long, but not doing something is also a decision. Mm-hmm. Another really amazing thing that you do throughout the film is you have really intense quiet moments. There's a lot of conversations, but there's a couple of really quiet moments that just really hit home. Like when Amy's in the bathroom and she kind of stuffs a towel under her shirt to kind of see what it would look like because she wants to be pregnant so badly. Mm-hmm. I've done that.
Yeah.
And I was just like, how does Tarun know that that is something that people do? Like, and then you had this other really intense shot. Amy is just like out running and like taking care of herself, but she runs past a playground and she sees a mom with a young daughter and she just like kind of watches that for a little while. That's like daggers.
I pulled that straight from my patients. I mean, this movie comes straight from the vein of the emotions of my patients through their hearts. And these are the things they told me. I mean, I would sit there for 45 minutes, whatever, phones are ringing. My technicians are like, you got this? I'm like, don't worry, we have another pharmacist. I'm sitting here. I want to understand. I want to help as much as I can. And sometimes part of being a good healthcare professional is just listening. And so when they told me all these things, the filmmaker in me went, there is something here. And it is my obligation to rope this together into something that is something that people can consume in a marketable way. Let's normalize this discussion. I think, I'm from a minority background. I have dealt with a lot of different other minority backgrounds of where my patients come from, and it is very taboo to talk about this stuff. I mean, there's still a very old-fashioned mentality of there's something wrong with a woman if she can't have a child, yet most people don't realize the man has just as big of a role in this job than women do, but yet women are the ones that have to bear the brunt of all this. And so I think that's awful. And I think the more and more we talk about it, the more and more the older generation will then sort of be okay with it. Hopefully this movie helps push that envelope a bit, helps push that line towards making it more acceptable to talk about. I don't want anyone to feel shame that they went through something like this or that they can't have a child. I want it to be as easy as you and I drinking a beer and, the third party sits next to us, they're having a beer and they just casually tell us we can't have a child, whatever. And we can have a great discussion about that and not be something like, oh, let me shame you on this.
Absolutely. I mean, 1 in 8 couples that are trying to conceive will have infertility. Like you said, everybody knows somebody, even if they don't know that they know someone, right? It's more common. And I think it's powerful to hear that, these young actors that you were working with that just kind of assumed that this was somebody else's issue. Like as they're doing this movie, they realize, wow, I actually do know people that
and it's closer to them. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it's a lot closer to them than you think. And I think that's kind of the big thing about it. When you open your eyes to it, you're going, oh my God, there's so many people around me that are going through this. This is a lot closer to me than I thought. Both of these actors came to me. They were not married, never had children. So they really heavily relied on how I explained couples go through this. And so they'd go, well, what is it that a woman goes through? What is it that a guy goes through? And I literally challenged them to go say, hey, I bet you anything or another, go into your families and ask. Ask your mom, because the moms are the gatekeepers of all the information of all the families, right? They'll be like, your aunt so-and-so's kid did it or whatever. They'll know. And I was like, ask your moms. And like I said, they came back to me a week or two later and they went, apparently 3 people in my family did it. Or like, I didn't know that my good cousin and his wife did it. And I was like, okay, now did you sit down? Did you talk to him? And they went, yeah, I had to know everything. Some of them even showed the script. And apparently one of the couples even cried when they read the script. And so those are the keys of knowing that you're on the right path when you're making a movie like this.
How about those really tough scenes? I don't want to give away the ending or I don't want to tell everybody what happens, but there's some really big growth moments that these characters have to go through. And, did the actors have a hard time getting there?
No, actually, they somehow this couple is, these 2 actors are really great when they're fighting with each other. I don't know why. And so they're just really good at it. And so some of those key scenes are phenomenal between these 2. And then when they really got into that headspace, and you can tell because in the screenings we've done, in the film festival we've gone to, people bawl. They start bawling at those scenes. And you'll know when you watch the movie, you'll get to that point and you'll go, oh my God, here come the wet works. And Again, it goes back to the first thing I told you, which was I wanted to be brutally honest about this journey, and to see these two people completely open up their heart and just pour onto each other. It's rough, it's difficult, but you know what? It's the honesty of life.
Curious if you've learned anything about your own family. Like, if anybody in your family watched this movie and reflected on their own history or been surprised at their reaction.
Yeah, so I found out a couple of my distant cousins had gone through it. They hadn't told anyone in the family at all. Actually, I was the first person they told to. They went, hey, none of the family knows, but we went through this. And I was like, you should be able to say this to the rest of the family. It's no big deal. My own family book that happened through this movie is its own movie on its own, right? Where it's like, I found out this happened and that happened. And then I sat down and I found out that it's a whole book that opens up, because our families are we're being minorities. We have so many different siblings. We've all come from the old country. And in the old country, medical care wasn't what it was. So I found out that, my mom had another sibling that had passed away early on due to something. And all these stories come out because now all of a sudden the gatekeepers of information, which is the clan of mamas, felt okay to tell me this stuff, start telling us a lot of this stuff, like, hey, you through diphtheria, we had one of our siblings pass away, and this and that happened, and so couldn't have a child, and there were a couple of miscarriages in the family. I was just shocked. I didn't know any of this stuff. And it was amazing to see the history book of my family kind of get written some more in front of me. These pages were there, but they had never been open to me before.
But sharing allows for people to feel less alone, allows for less shame.
And also closure and healing, right? Mm-hmm. Because again, this is a woman's issue. And so you had a generation of women. Now, obviously women are a lot more, they're open, it's better. But our mom's generation, things were very much hush-hush. That taboo was very much in place. And so they couldn't talk about these things unless it was with each other, right? So like I said, the clan of moms, they all know these things, right? The history books of our families are written through them. And if they don't feel comfortable sharing, we'll never know these things. Because again, the dads and the uncles, they don't want to hear this stuff out loud, right? But the moms know it. It's written in our history books. And so they don't care to tell any of the kids this unless we normalize that discussion. And like you said, I found out about so many miscarriages. I found out about passed away siblings, infertility issues, why certain couples had the amount of kids that they did or lack of thereof of kids in our family. I had no idea. I was a filmmaker at night. That's when I was Batman. I had the cape on. But when I was Bruce Wayne, I was the fertility pharmacist. I was in it, Monday through Friday, helping my patients out. And I always historically made comedies because that was my outlet away from the seriousness. But eventually this story really just sat in my heart for about 2 years. All the patients just kept putting something in me again and again, to the point where my heart got so heavy that I went, I can do this. I have an obligation to do this. I wasn't seeing content like this being made out there. I wasn't seeing these stories put out there. And I went, I have it in me as a filmmaker to say something. As a filmmaker, you can be the one that makes the Transformer movies and the big bang, bang, bangs. But a really great filmmaker has something to say. And I knew that there was something I wanted to say with this film. And I wanted it to resonate with people. So.
Well, that is absolutely wonderful. And it does. So where can people see the film?
Currently, it's in its rental market phase. So Apple TV, iTunes, anywhere where you have on demand. So Comcast, Xfinity, we're on Amazon Prime, go rent the movie. The more people that we get to rent this movie, the better chances there are in a couple of months that Netflix and Hulu, we're going to go and sit down with them and that they can put this on their platform. And that would just be amazing to have a film that speaks to this, that speaks to IVF, and have it on one of these big platforms, because otherwise Hollywood's not telling these stories.
I know, and I appreciate that you're doing it. Thank you so much for being here today, Tarun.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Lora.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Tarun Verma as much as I did. I truly enjoyed watching his film, Conception. It reminds me about the power of art. Whether a film or painting reminds you of your own experience, helps you feel less alone, or it's a stepping stone for a conversation that's difficult to have with your loved ones, we can all take away a lot from this film. Whether you are suffering with infertility yourself or you have loved ones that are having that experience and you want to learn more, Conception is a great film to watch. I'm your host, Dr. Lora Shahine, and this is Baby or Bust.
Baby or Bust is produced by Mark Ramsey, Jamie Solis, and Greg Moga. Executive produced by Paul Anderson and Nick Pinella for Workhouse Media. Baby or Bust is a Mark Ramsey media production.